Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to our dear viewers on Facebook, YouTube, and in the Zoom room. Welcome to the virtual Eid dinner of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community Scotland. Most of the time, around this time, right after the Eid, what you notice is we will invite our friends to the mosque to celebrate the Eid with them. But this time, due to the COVID and such an unprecedented time, there's no way we could come together. But here is the case, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is still thinking of our friends, that we still want to have some time with them. We live in a time where every continent, almost everywhere in the world, people seem to be crying for justice. We know of the incident which recently happened in the United States of America, where people are crying for justice in the sense of racism needs to be removed from every corner of the world, the earth. We, members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, think we have a solution to this. And as such, we have decided to theme today's virtual Eid reception, Islam's response to injustice and racism. As Muslims, we always start our event with a recitation from the Holy Quran. But even before we do that, let me remind everyone, those of you on Facebook and YouTube and in the Zoom room, that we will have a slot for a Q&A, question and answer session. And as such, if you have any comments, if you have any questions that you wish to be answered for you, do put them in the comment section on Facebook, in the YouTube, and also on Zoom. And during the Q&A session, the panel would be able to respond to all those comments and the questions for you. Just as I said, we start our event with a recitation from the Holy Quran. And with this, I call on our brother, Sajid Sajjad, to give us the Arabic recitation from the Holy Quran and in the English translation. If our brother Sajid is here.
Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعد الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب أحدكم بعدا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Translation of chapter 49, verses 13 to 14 of the Holy Quran just recited are as follows. O ye who believe, avoid most of suspicions, for suspicion in some cases is a sin. And spy not, nor backbite one another. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his brother who is dead? Certainly you would loathe it. And fear Allah, surely Allah is oft returning with compassion and is merciful. O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and we have made you into tribes and sub-tribes, that you may recognize one another. Verily, the most honorable among you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous amongst you. Surely Allah is all-knowing, all-aware.
Thank you very much, our brother Sajad, for that beautiful recitation. We carry on with the next on the agenda. And with this, I want to, first of all, once again, welcome all of you who have taken time off your very busy schedule to join us. I want to acknowledge some of the dignitaries who are among us today, but just to let everyone know, everyone here today is a dignitary to us. So in case, for whatever reason, your name has not been captured, please do understand we do honor and respect you taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us today. Not in any particular order, just as the list that I have in front of me has been provided to me. I have my number one on my list is Councillor Frank Ross, who is the Lord Provost of Edinburgh City. If you want, you can just wave up your hand so that people can see who is there. We have Linda Fabiani, MSP Deputy Presiding Officer of the Scottish Parliament, and then also the MSP for East Kilbride. We have Right Honourable Alison Tullis, MP for Glasgow Central. And in fact, I can go on and on. We also have the president, the regional president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community Scotland, in the person of Mr. Muhammad Ihsan Ahmed, and then also the regional missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community in the person of Imam Dawood Ahmed Qureshi, who is also here with us. I know there are quite a lot of councillors who are here with us, and I would want to thank all of you. I guess I'll probably be going to some of the list again as we go along, but for now, we'll move on to the next on the agenda so that I don't get caught up with time. Next is we have the welcome address to be done by the regional president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community in the person of Mr. Muhammad Ihsan Ahmed. So if we have Mr. Muhammad Ihsan Ahmed with us to give us the welcome address.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everyone, peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our Eid reception virtually. We hold such events in our mosques or local community centers, but due to the current pandemic, we are unable to do so. Hence, this event has been organized to bring together people from all walks of life so we can share the joy of Eid al-Adha with all and also discuss a very important issue, a very important subject affecting our society as highlighted by the title of this event. Eid al-Adha marks the completion of pilgrimage to Makkah by Muslims from various nations of the world on the 10th day of the Islamic month, Zulhajj. The universal bond of Islamic brotherhood is also strengthened as pilgrims of the worldwide nationalities gather together in the spirit of unity and harmony. The pilgrims offer the sacrifice of an animal at the end of the pilgrimage, which is also done by Muslims all over the world. This is done in remembrance of Abraham's readiness to sacrifice his son Ismail, who in turn resigned to being sacrificed under the belief that it was the will of God. With a brief overview of the recent Muslim celebration, I will briefly give you a highlight here of the beautiful teachings of Islam as it relates to the topic of our program today. This will be discussed in detail by our speakers later, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions. I will start with a quote from a speech delivered by the Holy Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. O people, your Lord is one. You are the progeny of the same Father who was created from dust. Hence, it is not permissible for you to make any discrimination between high and low. Neither an Arab has superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab. A white person is not superior to a black person, nor a black is superior to a white. The most honorable among you is, in the sight of God, is the one who is the most righteous. Countless prophets of God and the founder of all major religions have all endeavored to show us the path to peaceful coexistence and a better future. We are virtually convened here today to deepen our consciousness of the duties we owe to each other at the moral and spiritual levels. For Muslims, and indeed for all mankind, Islam seeks to stimulate and deepen the consciousness. It draws the attention of mankind towards fulfilling both the rights of God and the rights of God's creation. It emphasizes our duties and obligations so that each of us, by due discharge of them, should help safeguard freedom, justice, and equality for all, and should promote and foster human welfare, prosperity, and peace in all spheres of life. Ladies and gentlemen, Islam teaches and insists upon the comprehension and acceptance of the unity of the Creator, which in turn results in the unity and equality of man. Indeed, these must become compulsive if the chaos and confusion of the current times are to be avoided, and peace and prosperity in all spheres of life are to be promoted. On behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community Scotland, I thank all our guests and viewers and welcome you all to this virtual Eid reception. It is my humble prayer that today's event inspires us all to continuously strive individually and collectively in our respective capacities for the promotion of values of racial equality and supremacy of justice for all. May Allah so ordain and bless us all profoundly. Ameen. Thank you for having me. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And that was a short but very sweet welcome by the Regional President of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, Mr. Muhammad Ihsan. Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad Ihsan, for welcoming us. We now have a short video to play where you will see some of the glimpses of the worldwide health of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community efforts around the world in trying to instill justice and eliminating racism and some of these issues which are actually happening around the world, which eventually is affecting everyone in the world now. So if you have this video, we have our brother Osman Said, who would be kind enough to play the video for us.
मैं ये किस के नाम लिखूं जो अलम गुजर रहे हैं मेरे शहर जल रहे हैं मेरे लोग मर रहे हैं.
It is my fear that in view of the direction in which things are moving today, the political and economic dynamics of the countries of the world may lead to a world war.
We find anxiety and turmoil continue to spread and increase in the world. We find so much strife, restlessness and disorder. We find countries engaged in wars. Terrorist groups, political parties, major powers of the world, all consumed by their efforts to maintain or acquire supremacy, and leaving no stone unturned in their efforts towards pursuing their objectives. With all these hostilities engulfing the entire world, we also find a grand solution. We find a serene voice, a voice of reasoning and logic, traveling across the world, forewarning that if these actions continue, then most surely the entire planet will succumb to a detrimental end.
If the major powers do not act with justice and do not eliminate the frustrations of smaller nations and do not adopt great and wise policies, then the situation will spiral out of all control, and the destruction that will follow is beyond our comprehension and imagination. A very senior Russian military commander issued a serious warning about the potential risk of a nuclear war. It was his view that such a war would not be fought in Asia or elsewhere, but would be fought on Europe's border, and that the threat might originate and ignite from Eastern European countries. Though some people will say that this was simply his personal opinion, I myself do not believe his views to be improbable. But in addition, I also believe that if such a war breaks out, then it is highly likely that Asian countries will also become involved.
Have these words of the Khalifa not been proven to be true to the letter? The crisis between Russia and Ukraine have brought back memories of the Cold War, with nearly 100 member states of the United Nations failing to recognize the control of Crimea by the Russian Federation. Is that not a repeat of the past? When the Arab Spring first came to pass, many people in the world considered it to be a great means for the Arab world to come out of the Dark Ages and embrace modern times. The reality was quite the contrary. Is the world going towards this devastation? Hundreds of thousands of innocent lives have been lost, especially in the Middle East. How many more will it take for mankind to take note of the Khalifa's message?
If we want to save the world, then true justice needs to be shown at every level of society, and the problems faced in each country should be solved in a fair way that removes frustrations. No country's wealth should be looked upon enviously, and mutual policies should be made to help one another. Most importantly, the world must realize that it has forgotten its Creator, and they must come back to Him. Only when this happens can true peace be established, and without this there can be no guarantee of peace. I have spoken many times previously about the horrific consequences of another global war, and perhaps it will only be after such a war that the world will come to realize the destructive results of the unjust policies that were made only to satisfy personal ambitions and vested interests. I hope and pray that the world comes to its senses before such a disaster comes to pass. I hope and pray that the world comes to recognize and accept its Creator. With these words, I seek your leave. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that short video. I believe everyone watching would have learned a lot from this very short but very inspiring and something very important that we all need to take home, so that definitely we can improve upon ourselves wherever we are in trying to instill justice and removing racism. We now move on to the remarks of our guest speakers. And I believe number one on my list, not in any particular order, but then we have the Lord Provost of the Glasgow City Council, Councillor Philip Bratt. If we have Councillor Philip Bratt with us.
Yes, you do, Ahmed. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, good evening. Well, thank you, Ahmed, and thank you, everyone at the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. Assalamu alaikum to everyone and a good evening. It is indeed very strange, I think everyone will agree, that we are not able to meet in person for the first time ever. Something we usually do for very special occasions held by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. But I am very grateful, nevertheless, that I've been invited, as all the other guest speakers and guests, to share in this very important and very special occasion to celebrate Eid. I know that I've been asked to say a few words. I will try and keep to the 3 minutes allocated. Ahmed, I apologise in advance if I go slightly over. But I just want to say a big thank you to you and everyone of the organisers for this very important event tonight, which is, of course, the theme of tonight's meeting, as we have heard, is Islam's response to injustice and racism. For me, personally, I think that this title could be changed. I think it really should say everyone's response to injustice and racism, because ultimately all of us have a responsibility and a duty to respond to injustice and racism, no matter where it occurs, and to make sure that it does not occur anywhere. But without going into any depth, I will leave the discussion on this to others who will be speaking later on, who are probably far more literate on the subject and will be speaking far more eloquent than I am. But what I will want to speak about very briefly is about Glasgow and the current pandemic. Sadly, many people, as we all know, have felt the pain and have suffered loss of loved ones and friends over the last several months. And we all have been affected in one way or another in our own personal ways. Well, let me briefly tell you about something that at first may seem very unconnected, but if you please bear with me for a few moments, I will get to my point. A few days ago, I was asked by someone what my favourite symbol or parts of the coat of arms of Glasgow was, and what it also meant to me personally. You know what I'm talking about, of course, the birds, the tree, the fish, the bell. And as most of us will know, all these parts have a moral story behind them that relates to Glasgow's patron saint, St Mungo. Well, my answer was very short and to the point. I actually said that I could not pick one over the other. For me, it was all of them together, combined. Because although they all have a different moral story to tell, for me, they combine together to represent the diversity of our great city. So no matter who we are, where we come from, what we do or believe in, we all have a different story, but we are all Glaswegians. And it's just this diversity that makes us so strong. And it is through this strength that we have come together during this very difficult time. So friends, as we meet today in very unprecedented circumstances, the world that we know today is certainly not the world that we knew 4 months ago when lockdown restrictions started. This has been a very difficult and extraordinary time for us all. We have indeed come a long way since lockdown started, but we still have a long way to go. So I would say that this is not a time for complacency. But I am convinced that by working together, we will overcome. And over the last 4 months, I have had the opportunity to join many of my fellow Glaswegians in their local communities, doing what we as Glaswegians do best. And in times of trouble and distress, people from all backgrounds and all walks of life and all faiths or none, we have all rolled up our sleeves to do whatever we could to help our fellow citizens. And Glasgow's response is one that we should all be extremely proud of, not just now, but I think for many, many years to come. Volunteers, community organisations and the third sector have all demonstrated the best of us, and for that we should be forever grateful. So I would like to take this opportunity to express my thanks, all of our thanks to all the volunteers, all the community groups for stepping up to the plate in these very trying times and keeping us all going. And tonight, I particularly want to say a big thank you to the whole Ahmadiyya Muslim community for what they do. You have always been a shining example of looking after your fellow citizens and your neighbours, whether it's organising charity fund runs, which I've not had a chance to take part in despite Ahmed's persuasions, but I will do so. But you know, your food drives, your charitable work is something that we should be very, very proud of indeed. And I think that work has not only continued over the last few months, it has actually intensified. So I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to all of you. Your selflessness, your courage and your determination, as I said, are indeed a shining example to all of us. And you and all the other volunteers and key workers throughout our city make our city a better place every day, and now more than ever. And we have all faced challenges before as individuals and as a collective, but we have always overcome. We have faced this struggle over the last few months together, and we will continue to do so as we forged a new path to a new and hopefully a better normal. Going back to St Mungo, our patron saint, he was the first to utter the phrase, "Let Glasgow flourish." Our city, as we know, is one built on resilience and community spirit. These are characteristics which are strongly exemplified by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. So let me end by thanking all of you again and all the other volunteers and key workers for keeping us safe and helping your fellow citizens during these very difficult times. Thank you, Ahmed, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. And I know it's quite difficult when your Lord Provost says, I'm going to go over the time, but then please do not stop me. Thank you very much for your time. And I believe we will all pardon you for this. But then for the rest of the speakers, please try and stick with it within the time. If not, we will all be staying here overnight. I know it's quite a good opportunity and a good time that most of the time we would like to have such an opportunity to speak to people, but due to time, I would humbly request the rest of our speakers, and I'm actually going to the next Lord Provost of our Scotland capital city, Edinburgh City, who is in the person of Councillor Frank Ross. And I believe Councillor Frank Ross is here with us.
I am indeed, Ahmed. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Edinburgh is a very diverse city, and we regularly welcome in excess of 4 million people across from all over the world and from many faith groups. And as the city's first citizen, I believe it's very important that we should mark as many faith and heritage festivals as we possibly can. In particular, Eid, a time for family, friends, and sharing. But I also think it's a time for reflection to consider the messages of peace, forgiveness, and indeed fellowship. Within Edinburgh, the Muslim community makes a significant social and economic contribution to our city. And a close relationship has been forged with the City of Edinburgh Council and indeed our wider civil society over many years. And I know that we all greatly value this positive, purposeful and productive relationship and indeed wider friendship as it has developed. Now, Edinburgh will continue to promote an inclusive city agenda where faith and traditional heritage groups live, work and study in harmony alongside each other. Injustice and racism continue to have no part to play in our modern and progressive capital city, and we will together work to oppose and address any form of prejudice wherever or whenever it occurs, by peaceful means such as education, fostering respect, collaboration, and indeed tolerance. It's the various communities throughout our city working together which will continue the social and economic successes of our city. And it will be a continued cooperation that will assist our city in adapting and recovering from the life-changing impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. Across all communities, our most vulnerable have been profoundly affected, with many loved ones passing, the strains of living in isolation, employment and incomes being at risk, limited ability for schooling, and the very negative effects of being separated from family and friends. During this time, we've seen more people giving their time, volunteering, as Lord Provost Bratt said, across all our communities. But now, as we're entering the so-called new normal together, we face an uncertain few weeks and months. However, with our government guidance, we have a citywide phased return to a city which I think will be more inclusive going forward. So against the important backcloth of continuing to tackle injustice and racism, and in mitigating the impacts of COVID-19 on behalf of the people of Edinburgh, I want to sincerely and thank you all for your continuing diligence and help in assisting our city to live in harmony, in helping our most vulnerable and continuing to operate as best we can in such challenging circumstances. I think this is a tremendous event that has been organised tonight. Much better, as Lord Provost Rat said, much better if we were there in person and we could share the whole event more substantially. But in the current circumstances, bringing everybody together in this virtual world, giving us an opportunity to address these very serious issues, I'd just like to thank everybody who has brought this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frank Ross, the Lord Provost of Edinburgh City. And I believe we want to thank both Lord Provosts who have taken time out of their very busy schedule in this particular pandemic to still join us for such a wonderful occasion. So we thank you very much. We now move on to our next speaker, and she happens to be a very good friend of us in the person of the Queen Mother of Jamestown, Her Royal Highness, Na Tutu Soyo I. So if we have Na Tutu Soyo I, who resides in London, but is the Queen Mother from the Republic of Ghana. Do we have Na with us?
I need to. Okay, so can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but it looks as if we can see you.
Oh, you can't see me. Oh dear. Okay, I'm not sure what has gone on, but let me see if I can.
Do you want us to move on to the next speaker, then you can sort out the camera?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move on to the next speaker in the person of our own Deputy Presiding Officer of the Scottish Parliament and also the MSP for East Kilbride, in the person of Linda Fabiani, MSP. Is Linda with us?
Well, I'll say it again. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Salam alaikum.
Yes. Wa alaikum salam.
It's very nice to be here, as always. And I look forward to when I can be among you again, physically, rather than on a screen. The events that you run always make me happy, but they also make me sad. And the reason for that is because they make me happy because of all the great work that's done by the community. And our Lords Provost have talked about some of that. It's always good to see community work going on. But it also makes me quite sad because you're very good at putting together events that are joyous, but also remind us of the harsh realities of life. And there are harsh realities in our lives just now. And I recently read the leaflet that came out from His Holiness about the need for justice. And a phrase jumped out at me was when he said, Islam says that justice is the foundation upon which peace is built. And so we must pay heed to the urgent issues of our time. And we do have urgent issues. And I then got a letter from your Glasgow president, Mr. Abdul Samad Khan. And he said something that really struck me with force. He said, social harmony and lasting peace can only be achieved on the basis of justice at all levels in society. Yes. But then he went on to say, in this regard, we believe that first and foremost, it is the responsibility of those in authority, like you, to make this a reality and to make every effort necessary to eradicate all forms of discrimination, hatred, and injustice. And that really did make me think, because we recently had a debate in our Parliament about Black Lives Matter. following the terrible events that culminated in the death of Mr. Floyd in America. Just one in a long line of injustices to individuals in the US through the justice system. And in that debate in Parliament, we spoke about the need not just to recognise racism, but also to stand up and be counted and to fight against racism. And I think that is indeed a pledge that anyone who has any authority at all, no matter how small, any authority at all, any privilege to raise awareness amongst others, whether it be through education, whether it be public events, whether it just be individual to individual, to stand up and be counted and really say, no, we're not accepting this anymore. But also for institutional racism, because one of the sad things in our society is we don't just have racism amongst individuals, whether it be deliberate, whether it be unconscious, as it often is, but we also have institutional racism, and studies have shown that time after time. We have to deal with that. I believe that my own government is now really committed to that in very many ways. I believe my own political party is committed to it, and I believe other political parties are committed to it as well. So I hope that when we talk about the way forward in the new society post-COVID, that anti-racism and justice is very, very much part of that. And we should never forget, very difficult in 3 minutes, Ahmed, but we should never forget that poverty plays a very, very large part in this as well. So there's a lot of work to do, but I think the onus is on all of us to do that work. And I'll end with another word from His Holiness, which is, we must unite in our efforts to end all forms of extremism and prejudice, whether religious, racial, or of any other kind. I believe the Ahmadiyya Muslim community right across the world takes that to heart and believes in that and stands up to be counted on that. And I very, very much want to be someone who's recognised for that as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's always good to hear you speak. And then once again, we really very much appreciate taking time to join us today as well. We move on to our next speaker. And it's, again, no other person than our own revered MP for Glasgow Central in the person of Right Honourable Alison Tollis MP. So if you have Alison with us.
Hi, thank you so much, Ahmed. It's so lovely to see you. Salam alaikum and Eid Mubarak. I very much hoped, given that we'd missed Eid al-Fitr, that we'd be together for Eid al-Adha. And I hope that it won't be too much longer before we can all come together, because it is so difficult to be apart from one another. And I hope that it won't be too long. I was thinking as well after Mohammed Hassan's remarks about the Feast of the Sacrifice, and I wanted to thank everybody really for the sacrifices, the personal sacrifices that everybody has made over these past few months, and how difficult it has been for everybody not to be with loved ones, not to be with family, not to be with the people that you desperately want to see and to hold for all of this time. But I do hope very much, inshallah, that we're getting through this together, that we can see an end, hopefully, in sight if we continue to stick to what we must do, to observe the rules and to do all that we can to help one another. And in reflection of that, I wanted to thank you also for reaching out your hands to help others in need. And the Ahmadiyya community in Glasgow particularly has been incredibly good and strong at doing that and then supporting the wider community. So I wanted to thank the elders and to thank the Ahmadiyya Muslim Women's Association for all of the stellar efforts to provide hot meals to Glasgow's homeless throughout the lockdown, because that really is heartwarming that while everybody here in their own lives is suffering, you have taken the time to go out and do that and provide those meals to those who need it so very much. And I thank you for that. And I'm sure all my constituents would want to thank you for that too. And at this time, I've been watching a lot of the pictures of those suffering in Beirut after the horrible events of the past few days. But what gave me heart today was seeing people there helping one another. And the news report this evening showed people that had travelled from other parts of Lebanon to come to Beirut to help, to clean up. And there's people going around the streets with brooms and shovels, and it put me in mind of all of you on New Year's Day going out and doing your cleanups as well. That there are always people in any situation willing to help and willing to look after their fellow human beings. And in these difficult times, it is that helping one another that can give us the hope that the injustice that exists in the world doesn't have to exist, that it is within each of us that we can help and we can do more. And I wanted to thank each and every one of you for all of the things that you had done over the lockdown, and I'm sure more of in the weeks and months ahead, because that response to injustice touches other people and brings them together as well, and they can then return that in kind. So thank you so much for all that you've done. I hope that it won't be too long before we can see each other in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that is the prayer of the Supreme Head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, that the Almighty God indeed take away this COVID so that we can all come back together happily. And hopefully our next Eid event would be together and everyone can see each other. Thank you very much, Alison, for that brief message. We now move on to our next speaker, and I believe Her Royal Highness Na Chuchu Soyo the First is ready for us now.
Yes, Mr. Ahmed.
I know you wanted to hide your face, but finally we can see you now. Thank you.
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you. Very well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. First of all, Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak. Thank you so much for inviting me yet again to join you on this occasion and to discuss this very important topic. I always feel at home when I do come home to anything to do with Ahmadiyya. For me, the discussion on race and injustice is ironic, actually. It's ironic for the simple fact that at this present time, while the conversation about these two subjects have very much dominated our discourse, we also have, on the other hand, a global pandemic that is no respecter of races or of anybody. And it puts things in perspective somewhat, because it makes a whole mockery and a nonsense of the idea of injustice. Because here we are faced with a global pandemic that, as humanity, we are fighting together as a common enemy. And so does it make sense for this idea that one race will discriminate against the other? It doesn't for me. And I think that, on the other hand, to work for all of us as a community, our social justice system must be held accountable. I think I've said this often enough, held accountable to the tenets of the law that they're supposed to protect. And in so doing, gain the trust of the community yet again, so that when it comes to the discussion on race and injustice, it would be a discussion that is historical rather than something that's ongoing. And I know it sounds a bit like a pipe dream, but I think that when we look at the pandemic that we're all fighting, and as humans, we reflect on what it has meant to human life and what it has done to our psyche, the fact that we've been locked down in our homes for the most part of the last few months, unable to do anything or go anywhere. It should be an opportunity for reflection on how we treat each other, how we engage with each other, and how we treat the discussion on race and justice. And so considering I've only got 3 minutes, I don't want to say too much. I'd like to wrap it up here, but I want to say that I am encouraged by the work that you're doing, not just in Glasgow, because I know Glasgow is leading over the last couple of times that I've been on your program, but I know the Ahmadiyya movement is doing something amazing, which is to project religion in the positive light that it should be projected in, and to show what community spirit is like, and to show the love of God, I suppose, in works rather than just in words. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Na Tutu Soyo the first, for that brief, but definitely something to take home. Thank you very much once again. We now move on to a brief video of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community's spiritual head, our Khalifatul Masih the Fifth, just a caption of some of his messages around the world. And this is particularly messages delivered in the United States of America. And I want to thank the Muslim Television Ahmadiyya United States of America, MTA America team, who have done this wonderful job for us by taking some short clips of the message of our beloved Huzur, the Imam of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmed, in addressing the issue of racism and injustice. So do we have Osman Said again to play the video for us?
Thus, every Ahmadi should try to establish a pure society. This condition cannot arise until compassion arises in every Ahmadi's heart. Unless everyone treats the others like his own kinsmen, unless the walls of color, race, and nationality are made to fall, unless Asian, white, and African American consider themselves as Ahmadis, as human beings, equal to each other, and do their utmost to discharge the rights of others. Irrespective of differences of race, religion, or social background, we are united as human beings. Our common goal should be to foster peace, harmony, and goodwill between the people of all communities. And we should constantly aspire to and strive to leave behind a peaceful world for our children, in which people are able to live side by side, irrespective of differences of race, religion, or belief. The Quran thus makes clear that all people are born equal. Furthermore, in final sermon ever delivered by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, he instructed all Muslims to always remember that an Arab is not superior to a non-Arab, and nor is a non-Arab superior to an Arab. And he taught that a white person is not superior to a black person, and nor is a black person superior to a white person. Thus, it is clear teaching of Islam that the people of all nationalities and all races are equal.
Thank you very much for that short but very important message that I believe we all have to try to adhere to, so that we can live a life of supremacy of justice, and then also a life of innocent lives would matter. We seem to be climbing up and gradually getting to the climax of today, and that is getting to the keynote address. Our keynote speaker today is no other person than Imam Mansour Clark, who is a missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community residing in London, and also a member of the Ahmadiyya International Press team. So if you have our Imam Mansour Clark with us to deliver your keynote address.
That would be me, guilty as charged. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. I'll start by giving you the Islamic greeting of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Now, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. The fact that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, whenever we call people to our functions, we often have the tables covered with lovely curries and naan breads and drinks and sweets. And unfortunately, we don't have that available for you today. But hopefully we can make that up to you on a later date, and hopefully you'll bear with me while I go on for a bit with my words without the help of food to help you along. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. Whenever I hear about the concept of racism, especially in the modern day when we're hearing about it in the last few months and few years, often we come across this term or this chant of no justice, no peace. Now, many people have taken this to be a threat, that until justice comes along, we won't let there be peace. But in actuality, whenever I hear this term, to me, it just sounds like a fact that until there is justice, there will be no peace. And I think, as you've probably gathered by the other eminent speakers today, and also, of course, from the words of the worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmed, justice is something which is so integral to the establishment of peace that without it, simply, be it on a personal level, on a communal level, indeed, national or global, we will continue to see the erosion and the disestablishment of peace. Before I actually get into what I wanted to talk about, I came across a tweet this morning, which I was debating whether or not to put into the speech or not, but I think it's a good tweet, because it talks about how all the different prophets of God came, and along in Aramaic or Arabic or in other forms, they all said the words Assalamu alaikum, which means may peace be upon you. And the end of the tweet basically says that all prophets of God came to teach this same message, and all good people, regardless of faith, have this same message of peace and of love. But we need to be more than just peacekeepers, and rather become peacemakers in society. Because if we're all walking around trying to keep the peace and no one is there to establish it, we can only ever get worse than the situation that we already find ourselves in. Coming on to today, it's a really important event, because when we look at Eid, of course, everyone knows Eid to be a day of celebration and gifts and color and cuisines and culture. But Eid al-Adha, specifically this Eid, literally is an Eid, a celebration of sacrifice. It's a willingness and preparedness to sacrifice those things that you hold most dear, that you value most dearly in your life, for the sake of good. To stand up for what is right, and to be able to and be willing to sacrifice everything for that cause. When we look around us in the day to day, there are so many atrocities that we come across and that we see. And yet when we talk about them, when we become keyboard warriors and we're on our social media talking about how horrible it is, or when we're on Zoom calls talking about how much we should work to do better, one comment that was made just a couple of moments ago was that we should prove it with our actions and not just our words. And that's not something which can only be established on an international basis. That is something which each and every one of us can help to establish justice on a day-to-day basis in the small things in our lives. And I'll come on to that a little bit later on as well. In this day and age, when we're all caught up in the rat race of, I'm stopping myself from saying America first, but you know what I mean. Every country, every person, every family, every sibling, every spouse, everyone is trying to put themselves first, and everyone else follows behind. When we're caught up in this rat race, this need to establish justice and the need to establish empathy, which I'll come on to, becomes paramount. Because justice and empathy are the antithesis to selfishness, to that personal greed to want to come first all the time. And that is something which is very, very important for us to remember. So again, no justice, no peace. For me, it's a fact. It's not a threat. It's something that we should live by and understand that until and unless there is justice, we can't hope for true peace. And that's why we understand that the hashtag or the motto, for example, that we're talking about is hashtag supremacy of justice. That when justice reigns supreme, we will start to see the emergence of peace in every sector of society. In Arabic, the term injustice, so we have justice and the opposite is injustice, but in Arabic, we have a word for that called zulm. Now, zulm, the definition of that, broadly anglicized as injustice, the definition is, this is Arabic, wada ash-shay'u bighayri mahallihi, putting something in a place where it doesn't belong. Now, that's not just a physical thing, that's everything. So basically, putting something such as importance, so importance to the color of your skin, importance to your tax bracket, to your income, to who you're voting for in the next elections. Don't worry, I won't judge. Putting importance on those things, but where importance isn't necessarily inherent. And then taking away importance and value, such as from a person's worth or from a person's beautiful nature, and putting it somewhere else, taking away that importance, taking away that value. These things come under this concept of zulm. And zulm is, again, the antithesis of justice. So when we are walking around and we place importance on the amount of melanin in someone's skin, as opposed to the strength and power and fortitude of their character, that is zulm. And a zulm in itself, someone who does zulm is called a zalim. So an oppressor, someone who does injustice. And by definition, a zalim is the opposite of a Muslim. So Muslims, we truly believe that Islam being the Arabic word for peace, Muslim being someone who spreads peace, quite literally, we believe that every single peace-loving person in the world is in one way a Muslim, because they are wanting to spread peace in the entire world and trying to take away and tackle down zulm, i.e. the putting of something in a place where it shouldn't be. In fact, this is the core of all the negative issues that we have in life. Pardon me, sorry. It's very warm, dry throat. Because some of us at the dinner table will put more emphasis on our phones. My wife doesn't give me the end of it, rather than talking to the rest of the family at the dinner table. Some of us might feel that our opinion is more important than that of our neighbors. Or some of us might feel that, actually, do you know what? Our holiday in the summer holidays might be more important than our kid going to school. Whatever it is, if it's something small, something big, something international, such as a war in a certain country, the benefits of going to war in a certain country might outweigh the fact that hundreds of thousands of people might die in the process. Everything is about justice. It's about putting the just amount of importance on the right thing, and then adhering to that justice and adhering to that balance. In Islam, we are taught that there are two fundamental principles that Islam sits upon. They're called the hukuk. Haq means right in Arabic, so like the right of someone. Hukuk is the plural. So hukuken is the two rights. One is the right of the Creator, so how we are with God, our worship and our relationship with Him. But the other is hukukul ibad, which means the rights of the creation of God. And we're taught that if and unless you are looking after the rights of the creation of God, you cannot claim to be a true believer in God, a true Muslim for us, and indeed a good human being for absolutely everyone else. The fact of the matter is that unless we treat the people around us as if they are us, as if they are members of our own family, we cannot establish justice. And without that justice, we will continue to see this sprouting of weeds from that same root of injustice. Be that the concept of slavery before, be that the concept of racism now, be that the way that the Bosnian genocide wiped out 100,000 people in just a short number of years. Whatever it is, I mean, I give one example, but I mean, there are thousands and we don't need to go into them. But in everyone's mind, World War II, the Holocaust, all of these are examples of injustice, where people placed importance on the color of their eyes, the language they speak, the color of their passport, and the color of their skin. This is injustice. When we place importance on the right thing, we will slowly see that these kind of sprouting weeds and these branches of this evil will slowly erode and come to die. In the words of the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we must stop seeing the problems of the world as other people's problems, and instead come to see each other as members of one family. Now, this is something which is also reflective of the words of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, who taught that the body of people who love peace are like one body. Or the people that love peace are like one body. That when a finger is in pain, the whole body writhes in pain. And that should be the case of a true society based on morals, justice, and empathy. See, this is the difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is, and I'm not going to give a lesson on this, but quite simply, sympathy is when we are trying to imagine that, oh, look at that person and his pain or her pain. Oh, how bad they must be feeling about it. I feel that I should help them. Empathy is when we own that pain and feel it for ourselves. And until and unless we do that, we cannot truly feel the pain of others. The fact is that, for example, we can't understand what Rosa Parks felt in Montgomery City when she stood there on the bus and saying, when she sat down on the bus and said, I'm not going to move. You can't see that as someone else's pain. Because if you start imagining that as if it was your color of skin that was being discriminated against, you were being persecuted. If it was your children that came back on a day at school and said, Mum, Dad, I was treated like this because of my religion. I was treated like this because of the color of the skin, or the fact that I have a disability, or the fact that we don't earn enough. How would that make you feel? You see, that is when you say that's unjust, because that's an injustice. You can only truly feel it if you try to harbor those emotions inside your own heart, to realize what it is that person must be feeling. That is the difference between empathy and sympathy. It's important, of course, for us to remember that it's not just huge things like racism or discrimination against someone's religion that is prevalent in the day-to-day. In fact, it's every small little thing. We're taught on the playground, for example, in all of our schools, we're taught treat others how you like to be treated. And it's such a basic principle, such a fundamental understanding of life. Treat others how you yourself would like to be treated. And everyone usually says, yeah, absolutely. We give others their rights before we take them ourselves. Because in everyone's lives, we are the hero in our own story. We always justify things to ourselves. But small little things will describe how just we really are, how much we empathize with other people's pain. And I like to give the example of a roundabout. If you're at the roundabout and traffic coming from the right takes preference, but if you were to go in front and someone who has right of way, doesn't have right of way, was to come and cut in front of you, that feeling of rage straight away, that's my right. How on earth can he or she decide to take away my right? That sudden surge of rage, that is our innate want to establish justice for ourselves. But it's only when we want to have that same, I'm not saying have road rage for other people, cutting off other people, but it's a general principle. Until and unless we have that urge and want to establish justice for other people, we cannot truly be this cosmopolitan and world village that we claim to be. That reality, when we understand the people around us as to be members of our own family, when, as His Holiness said, when we see the problems of others as our own problems, only then can true justice be established. And this isn't something just taught in Islam, or indeed the Abrahamic religions, or indeed any religion. This is something common in our human morality, that good people are kind people that look to the needs of others, not just justifying their own vested interests. I was reading a couple of days ago an article that spoke about how the bombs dropped. It was the 75th anniversary, I believe, 75th anniversary of the bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki a couple of days ago. And there was still debate as to whether the dropping of those bombs was justifiable or not. Even though people historically have now said it made absolutely no effect on the war and killed so many people, and generations of people were born with deformities and physical problems and indeed psychological issues for years to come. And yet still there are people who want to justify those acts. The fact is, if we remove justice from the equation, anything goes. But when we have justice as that foundational anchor, that we judge everything by, that touchstone, as it were, then we learn to live our lives in a way that's not just part of the rat race. It's part of something bigger, part of making society that works for the many, not for the few. Don't worry, I'm not promoting Labour in this at all, even though I am a Labour supporter. The fact of the matter is that when we understand that these are people from our own family, be they black, brown, or any other race, be they Muslim, non-Muslim, be they living in this part of the country or another part of the country, be they voting red, yellow, or blue, or green, or any other color that you want. When we understand that we are human, when we understand that it doesn't matter about how much melanin is in our skin, but that when we die, our ashes and our bones are all the same color. Until and unless we realize that, because coronavirus pandemic, we've already talked about it. It doesn't care the color of our skin. A raging fire it doesn't care which country you were born in. A specific disease which rips through families like cancer, it doesn't care about the color of our skin. So why are we still sitting here talking about the color of our skin? The reality is that this is something which needs to be addressed, but the root of this is justice. Once we have justice, these other things fall away. And justice can only be established when we bring empathy into our hearts. When it's not all about how much of this pot of food can I have, and more about how can I divide this between the people that are here? How can I look after the rights of others rather than just the rights of myself? It's already been mentioned, but the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, said something so powerful that it can't be not said again. Because from his very first revelation, when he said that man has been made from a clot with no color, a clot, a simple drop of dirty fluid, becoming something that's a clot that's given bones and flesh and then finally given skin. The least important thing. But we forget the soul, the flesh, the bones, the feelings, the emotions in a person, and we judge them on face value. From that to the very final sermon that he gave, when he said that an Arab is not superior to a non-Arab, nor is a non-Arab superior to an Arab. A white person is not superior to a black person, nor is a black person superior to a white. As humans, everyone is equal in the sight of God. The fact of the matter is that until and unless we do this and judge people on their actions as opposed to the color of their skin, when we judge people on their intention and their worth as a human being, rather than how much they can bring to the table, only then can we establish true justice and establish peace in the earth. I know I'm probably running out of time. I do have the tendency to blabber on a bit, but I'll leave you with a couple of short quotes. Indeed, one quote from the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, because for me, he is such a man who goes about in the whole world, who has given his life, who doesn't receive any money for his work, and yet spends every single waking moment spreading peace and establishing justice in the world, speaking to world leaders, not just speaking to members of his own community, going out of his comfort zone around the world to go into impoverished areas where before he worked on the ground, establishing wells and communities and places of education, places of sanitation, but now leads a global community to establish justice. And one of our dear friends, I believe it was Peter, that said in the beginning that we thank the Ahmadiyya Muslim community for your work. His Holiness has said repeatedly, we don't do it for thanks. We don't do it for the fact that we want people to acknowledge what we're doing. We do this because this is our duty. If we decide and we claim to be theists and believers in God, as I said in the beginning, the rights of God go hand in hand with the rights of God's creation. You cannot have one without the other. I'll leave you with his words. Unless everyone treats the other like his own kinsman, unless the walls of color, race, and nationality are made to fall, unless Asian, white, and African Americans consider themselves as human beings, equal to each other, and do their utmost to discharge the rights of others, unless such a condition prevails in everyone, we cannot truly fulfill our pledge. In order to protect our future generations, it is essential that we set aside our differences and focus on fulfilling each other's rights and serving humanity. It is our responsibility and indeed our obligation to ensure we leave behind a peaceful and prosperous world for those that follow us. Thank you very much for listening to me. And again, thank you very much for coming out today. Well, staying in today, but giving us your time and your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I believe I was actually giggling myself, and I believe others would have done the same because you made it quite interesting to listen to. No wonder you're a young man. So thank you very much for that wonderful, inspiring address for us. And that takes us to the next on the agenda, and that is the Q&A session, which is most of the time one of my favorite, because that is where we tend to get people's questions actually answered. But even before that, I think I would want to acknowledge some of the dignitaries who have also joined us. And if I should just check my list here, we have Claire Adamson, MSP, MSP for Motherwell and Wishaw. And we have McFinn, Councillor McFinn, the local councillor for Dundee City Council. We also have Councillor Ryan Houghton and Councillor Steve Rome. I'm just trying to see as many of the dignitaries that we have to acknowledge. So in case, for whatever reason, I miss you, please do forgive me for that one. We move on to the Q&A session, and I believe our three young imams are ready, including the keynote speaker, Imam Mansour Clark. We have our Imam Abdullah Diba from across the Atlantic Ocean, from the United States of America. If you are all here, if you can just shout out for me to see that you're around. And then we also have Imam Nuruddin Ahmed Jahangir, who is also an Imam of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, also based in London, but works with the Review of Religions, which is the oldest magazine, religious magazine, religious English magazine, which has been in existence for quite a while. I'll now move on to the questions. And if I can hear Imam Abdullah Diba and Imam Nuruddin to know that they are here with us.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I'm right here with you, sir.
Thank you very much with your wonderful American accent. And then what about Nuruddin? Where's Imam Nuruddin?
Stick up.
Yes, my brother from Africa is also here with us, Nuruddin. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'll just move on. I'll crack on straight away with the questions. But I'll start with let me start with the Imam Abdullah Diba from the United States of America. Has justice and racism got anything to do with religion and God?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Thank you very much for that. And you said this was your favorite part of the program. I think I'll have to say the keynote was outstanding. It has to be everyone's favorite, regardless of any other performance. So let me just put that as a disclaimer. That was beautiful. It was very relevant. It taught me a lot, and it makes it personal. And that's what Islam also, highlights, right? As long as we don't make this a personal thing, it becomes a problem. As long as it's somebody else's problem, it is a problem. So in a book of the fourth Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, may Allah be pleased with him, who passed away in 2003 before the current Khalifa became the supreme head of the worldwide community. In his book, Islam's Response to Contemporary Issues, he discusses in detail the issue of race, the issue of justice. But again, it begins with personal peace. How do you establish peace within yourself first? And that has to do with abiding by the principles of justice in your own self. And as eloquently put by my colleague, Imam Mansour Clark as well. And then you look outside, within your family, within the society. And this is how we'll begin to affect everybody else. In the Holy Quran, we are told as Muslims that the best example for us is the life of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Where it says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ إِسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, that you find in the Holy Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace upon him, the best model, the best example that you can follow. In his life, he has shown us in every step of the way, every decision that he has made, his interaction with his companions, his interaction with his wives, with his friends, and even those who thought they were his enemies, the way he treated them was the best way of establishing justice. And the Holy Quran tells us, I love the example of the roundabout. And this is something that the Supreme Head has always highlighted as well, that as Muslims, we are taught, how do you give up your own right in order for somebody else's right to be established? This is a principle that Islam puts. And the Holy Quran tells us, right? Do not abide by any other way than with justice, even if it's against your own self and against your kindred, against your own family or your own relatives. So if you can establish that justice first to say, I will give up my right so that so that somebody else's right will be established, then you're saying something. And before we go into world peace, before we go into peace in Scotland or in the United States to get rid of all this racism, if I can give up my right for somebody else's right to be established, then I'll be contributing. And this is the most basic form of justice that Islam presents. And it tells us that without that, every other thing will just become superficial. It wouldn't make any sense. And this is what will tackle every problem of whether it's racism or injustice.
Thank you very much, Imam Abdullah Diba. And I'll move on to the next question. And I guess Nuruddin Jahangir would know that would be for him. That is, what advice would you give on gang culture, especially in the youth living in inner cities, and how can faith bring change to those living in those vicious cycles?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me, first of all. Well, gang culture, I must say I didn't grow up in it myself. I grew up in the countryside, but I know a lot of my friends, I've spoken to them about it, who have gone through such a society. And I realized that there's a very similar factor for all those who actually got through and managed to safeguard themselves from such vice, you can say. And that factor is education. Now, when you grow up in a society where there's crime all around you, it's very easy to then be involved in it because you do not know better. And you see that there is an easy gain in that. However, when for example, if the parents at home, if you make a whole fabric around you where you realize that this is incorrect, and you show them that in the long term, this is something which should actually be harming you and will be harming those around you and will be causing injustice. Because in essence, when you're committing a crime, you're stealing the rights of another. So as I said, the whole theme is about injustice. We're educating those around us. We're educating the youth. The third caliph of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community had beautifully explained, or the second caliph, my apologies, that you cannot reform a nation without first reforming its youth. So it always starts from a very young age, where you're supposed to give everybody a framework where they are to know what choices they're to make when they do grow older. And they should know that whatever I do in this life, I will also feel the consequences of it in the next life as well. So when somebody has that in mind, they know that I have to act correctly, even if I feel it is against my right. So again, when we're going back to gang culture, it's very easy, I said, to fall into that because there's peer pressure as well. And the Caliph of Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper, has also explained in one of his sittings that your surroundings, the people around you, your friends, your colleagues, those are the people who can have a very big influence upon you. So when you do feel that somebody is bringing you away from God, bringing you away from faith, bringing you away from doing good, then you have to take a step back and think, wait a minute, are these people helping me to do what is right, or are they bringing me to something which is wrong? So we have to be very careful in the people that we also choose to be our friends. It's not an easy decision, but it is something which we have to be brave enough to do. So, and again, that main factor I want to talk about is about education, which is a responsibility of not just the parents, but also the country, also the people around you, also your friends. And it's something we should be doing to help all our people who do know that are in such situations to get out of these circumstances.
Thank you very much. I'll now move on to the next question. And I believe I'll combine these two questions because they seem to be quite similar to each other. And that is for Imam Mansour Clark, our keynote speaker. How you look at and what you think of protests, how would you look at and what you think of protests that were carried out throughout the world after the brutal death of George Floyd? And then also the next one, which is quite a similar one, is what is the correct method to protest against racism? So I'll combine both questions for Imam Mansour.
Okay, Jazakumullah, thank you very much for the questions. I think it's important to understand that you cannot fight fire with fire. And that's something that we've learned from such a young age, and yet it's something that we don't seem to implement in our day-to-day life. So I think there's two things we need to understand. First of all, we need to understand that the emotions and the feelings of people who have been enduring injustices and barbarism for so many years now, eventually, unless the roots of those are removed, we will again and again see violence erupting on the streets. It's a fact. You can't compress people's emotions and feelings and expect them not to do anything. Some people will stay quiet for a period of time, but ultimately, all it will take is one match to go off and the whole stack of hay is going to set on fire. The fact of the matter is that we need to understand that this is the case. What I do want to say, though, as I've said in the beginning, is that fighting fire with fire will never be the answer. So, for example, I understand the sentiments of, say, pulling down the statues. I fully understand the sentiment. And perhaps, if I wanted to go against the government, that is something that I would think about doing. But the fact is that as citizens of any state or citizens of any nation, there is always a democratic and a peaceful way of doing things. His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad has also said that if individuals wish on a personal basis to go and to show their support of certain movements where they are championing the rights of others, they're allowed to do so, as long as those movements and those protests are not violent. Because the moment that we're violent, the moment that we start usurping the rights of others, say, for example, we have a mass protest where we shut down, say, from all the petrol stations in the UK. The moment we do that, we are putting other people into discomfort. We are usurping other people's rights. And then we are just as bad as the people who usurped our rights. So the way to approach these issues is with a lot of sensitivity, to understand the emotions of other people. And then in that place of understanding, to realize that we must speak to people in a way of respect. And going out and putting down statues or graffitiing on walls, it's an expression of anger and frustration. No one expects that pulling a statue down is going to solve racism. It is an expression of their frustration at the fact that no one is truly listening to the problems that are existing. And so the correct way, I would say, is the most beneficial and pragmatic way, which is to try and campaign, to speak, and to try to make a difference. Go into politics, go into those fields where you can make a difference and have your voice heard. Traditionally, BAME groups across the whole world are grossly underrepresented, be that in the media, be that in the government. And so if we really wish to make a difference, there is a democratic process which we must adhere to in order for our voices to be voices of reason and peace, where we can establish justice, remember, which is the core principle of having peace in life.
Thank you very much. And I'll move on to Imam Abdullah Diba in the United States. And that is a question for you for a brother from Ghana. And is Eid a jamboree or entirely a religious affair? Imam Abdullah Diba.
That's pretty straightforward. It is a religious affair, and as I'll have to go back to the keynote speaker when he said it right in the beginning, you can tell I was listening, bro. So when he said it right in the beginning, right, that it's a celebration of sacrifice, right, and then that's the word that needs to be highlighted. We are sacrificing, and the Holy Quran tells us that this is not just a feast. When Allah Almighty says that I'm not in need of the flesh nor the blood, right? What I'm in need of is your taqwa, your righteousness. So when we, and for those who may not know, in the Eid, we sacrifice animals symbolically, as Prophet Abraham did when God Almighty commanded him to do so in the Bible as well as in the Holy Quran, when he was commanded by God Almighty to sacrifice his son and he ended up sacrificing an animal when God told him that you fulfilled your dream already. If you don't know, that's a very bad context that I'm giving you. It's very summarized, and I might have confused you a little bit more, but that's not the part of the question. The main part here is in that spirit of following the example of Abraham, we as Muslims also sacrifice animals at that same time of the year. And God Almighty tells us that when you are slaughtering that animal, sacrificing that animal only for the sake of God, the way that the animal is submissive to you, that's the spirit that you also need to show in your submission to God Almighty, the total obedience, and putting yourself in front of God the same way that that animal is submitting itself, according to your will, if you want to put it that way. But again, we say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar when we are slaughtering, to say that this is happening only for the sake of Allah. So that celebration per se of joy is God Almighty is giving us the ability and the opportunity to follow in the footsteps of Abraham, who was, as we call him, the father of the prophets. So in essence, what we are doing is we are rejuvenating, we're renewing that spirit of sacrifice that is in us. And again, it comes back to this same topic, when you can sacrifice something that's in your favor, right? Something that's your right for the right of somebody else. It all ties down together. So it's not a jamboree. It's not, you dance around and celebrate and miss all your prayers, right? Or you're greedy with the food so much that, during the festival, you care about your own plate and you don't care about somebody else, whether they have something to eat after you have taken it. So all of these things in our day-to-day lives, just there to remind us. And that is the real spirit of Eid.
Thank you very much. I'll move on to our next panel in the person of Ahmed Nuruddin Jahangir Imam. And that is, what can the Western countries do to make sure that justice is served at all levels and for all individuals, regardless of their faith or their race?
Yeah, so this is very easy, actually. It's something which is, it doesn't have to just relate to the West. I think what the issue is in the West at the moment is that some nations, they look at their own vested interests. If you look at the recent wars and stuff, you can see that a lot of things have happened, not just to set peace in those countries, but in fact for their own gain. So when we live in Western countries, we have to realize that there are others, we don't want to make them suffer. We have to do things to make things right, to set the justice in motion, not just to gain something out of it ourselves. So in essence, what we need to do to do that is, as His Holiness has explained over and over again, is that we have to keep looking at what is right for others. For example, like there is the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that you cannot truly believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. That is in the Bible as well, I believe. And in all major religions, there is the same notion that you have to love for others what you love for yourself. So when you want the best for yourself and for your own family, you have to also want that for others around you. You have to start that. Every single person individually has to start that within their own homes. And once they've established that, and establish it within your neighbors as well, establish it within your own society, every single one of us has that responsibility of trying to, wherever we see injustice, we have to try and put it right, whether it is by word of tongue, whether it is by action, the least of things, the least we can do is at least abhor it within our own hearts. Now, when we start to do things, build stuff from a local level, eventually we get to a regional level, and then to a national level, and then to an international level. We have to keep those same principles in line. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he actually established a whole charter of rights in Medina, where, as you mentioned about, it doesn't matter about their faith. Well, this was established over 1400 years ago, where he said that it doesn't matter if you're a Jew, if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're a pagan, you have to follow whatever the set rules are within Medina at the time, because you will be judged according to that. You will not be, for example, if somebody's a Jew, they will also have the right to not just be, judged by the law of the Prophet Muhammad. They will also have the choice of being judged by their own scriptures. So that in that sense, every Muslim had to take care of all the Jews, all the Christians, all the pagans, and the same went for the and for the Christians and the Jews. So that responsibility lies on every single person within society. So if every single one of us realizes that we have this magnificent role within society, to disrupt that would mean that we are committing an injustice. So in the West, we have to continue to, because we are in more, you can say, developed countries, we have to realize that we have more to give to others. There are those countries who are suffering right now. We see what's happened in Beirut. And it was a wonderful response as well. We can see from like Germany, from the UK, from America, from other countries, where they're sending people to help those in need. So with the more that we have, the more that we also have to give others. We have to realize that this life is very, very short. And whatever good we can do in this life, we have to try and avail of it as quickly as possible. And because we have scales, the scale of good and the scale of bad, the more good that we do, the more we also send good for ourselves in the hereafter. And that is something which we have to keep in mind to enable society to also prosper.
Thank you very much. I guess time will probably permit me to go for one more, probably two more questions, because it's already just about time. And this is for our keynote speaker. If Islam preaches justice as a means of achieving peace, as your community head claims, why is it that much of the Muslim world is not experiencing peace?
Absolutely, a brilliant question. I think it's something very, very easy to understand. The fact of the matter is that I would say, show me a quote-unquote Muslim country in the world. I mean, everything from what we've heard about Jamal Khashoggi to what's happening in Iran, to what's happening in Iraq, to the massacre of people all around the world. The fact of the matter is that people are not abiding by the rules set by God. And until and unless we do so, until and unless we have justice in the world, this is not me sitting here saying the whole of the East is fully established upon justice and everyone's a really good Muslim and everyone's doing absolutely everything that they should be. They're obviously not. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim or not Muslim. If you establish justice, you will see peace. It's as simple as that. So the question is, and I would pose this to everyone else, the fact that what is stopping us from accepting this message of justice? Because we see in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the community that abides by the teachings given by His Holiness and given by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, through the Holy Quran, when we abide by those, we are seeing justice in our ranks. This is something which should be seen as an example and a precedent for other people to follow. Establish justice and you will see the same. I think this goes for Muslims and non-Muslims. You're quite right in saying some of the most gross atrocities against human rights are happening in quote-unquote Muslim countries. And I would contest that the countries that call themselves Muslim are some of the people that are furthest away from the principles of Islam as possible. So that would be my short answer. Not sure about sweet, but short nevertheless.
Thank you very much. I believe we started with a keynote speaker, and then we seem to have finished with you as well. I would want to thank all the panel for taking the time to join us. I know you guys are very busy imams doing all sorts of work around the world. We now move on to the closing remarks, and this is going to be done by our imam in Scotland, Imam Dawood Ahmed Qureshi, who is the regional missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community Scotland. So if you have Imam Dawood Ahmed Qureshi ready with us. Is Imam Dawood Ahmed Qureshi?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me opportunity to say a few words at the end. First of all, I would like to say here that since I came in Scotland here almost 11 years ago, this is the first time, as everybody knows, that we are meeting in this way in virtual situation. But many of our colleagues we have seen today, we know them face to face, but some were new. We are very thankful to all of them that they have given us time to speak about the subject. The second thing I would like to say that this is also a great prophecy which has been fulfilled in these days in the world, which is mentioned in the 81st chapter of the Holy Quran and verse number 8, in which Allah the Almighty says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wa izan nafus zuwijat," that when people are brought together. So with this new inventions like social media, this is a great blessing that we are meeting today. At least we can see each other, we can speak to each other, and we can share our experience with each other. If not, it would have been a disaster the way we are habitual to seeing each other, and the world has become a global village. The second thing which I would like to say that one other thing which we must realize, especially staying in Western world, that in these few months we have realized that what the suffering is. Unfortunately, sometimes we do not realize that what happened in those countries which are deprived countries, and people go and wage war against them for many years, and they become hostage. A few weeks ago, I just went to see my GP, and one thing he said that the most cases or most people who phone us, they complain about stress, and this is just in few months' time. But you just imagine people where the war goes on for many years, for 9 years, for 10 years, and they don't know that in next moment what will happen to them. So I think that this is a great moment for us to realize and reflect that when, with the support of some of the Western countries, people really do injustice to their people, how people suffer and what the suffering is. With these few words, I am again thankful to especially for the organizers, and also especially to our guests who spoke earlier on before the keynote speaker, and our MSPs, MPs, and also our councillors, some of them who spoke and some of were not able to get time. But still, I think that we should all strive for justice, for peace in the world, as we have heard from many of our speakers, especially from the guest keynote address, and also from question and answer session, those of our colleagues who answered some of the questions. So thank you very much for giving me this time to just say a few words to all of you. Jazakumullah khairan jaza. May God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Imam Dawood Ahmed Qureshi, the regional missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, for that brief closing remarks. And I believe it gives me the singular honor here to thank each and every one of you, especially our guest speakers, who took time out of your very busy schedules to join us today to make this event a successful one. A lot has been said, a lot of thought-provoking messages have been given to us. Now the ball is in our court. What do we do with it? We take it away, and our job is not to be bystanders, but to be empathetic, as our keynote speaker said today. Be empathetic and try to instill justice in every corner of the world in your own way, so that with this, we can all together achieve that supremacy of justice and the innocent life matters that we are all striving for. Love for all, hatred for none is the message and the motto of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. With this, I request our Imam Dawood Ahmed Qureshi to lead us in a silent prayer to bring the event to a close. Imam Dawood Ahmed Qureshi. And what we normally do is we raise our hands to say the prayer in our own little way, in a quiet way. Any one of you can also do as you prefer. Thank you.
Okay, please join me in silent prayer. Ameen. Jazakumullah.
Amen. And thank you very much once again. And please keep the conversation going on Facebook, YouTube, and then definitely we'll get some team to respond to them. Thank you very much once again. And this all time will permit us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.